Okay, so principle number 5 in your book is marriage on mission. So you talk about the definition of helper and how the biblical definition of a woman being a helper is in direct contrast to the battle of the sexes that we see in our culture today. So can you kind of unpack that for us and why understanding a biblical definition of woman being a helper is vital to living marriage on mission as God intended?
Yes. So this comes from one of my absolute favorite books called The Glory of Man by Peter Leithart. And if there's any one book you read from this conversation, go read The Glory of Man by Peter Leithart because it's incredible. And so in this book, he is slowly walking through Genesis 1 through 3, and he introduces this idea of the battle mate based on Ezer Kenegdo in Genesis 2. Now, the phrase Ezer Kenegdo is typically translated as the helpmate. And this is a very good translation when properly understood. But of course, in many circles has been taken to mean something like a domestic servant or the help or some sort of secondary individual who just handles the administrative tasks while the real work is being done by the man or someone else in the household. And so he introduces the phrase of battlemate because every other time that the phrase Ezer Kenegdo is mentioned in the Bible, it's outside of Genesis. It's in reference to a stronger party coming to the aid of a weaker party. So God coming to the aid of Israel, or David's mighty men coming to the aid of Israel again in many cases. And so the way that Peter Leithart describes it is that ultimately when we're talking about woman as the Ezer Kenegdo to her husband, we're talking about a stronger party coming to complete and enable them to fulfill the mission that God has called them to. And as with Adam, this is in many cases a mission that is given to Adam, a vision given to Adam, that Eve is the essential component to complete that, to take it way further than Adam ever could have gone. And so it's not necessarily this like egalitarian, are we going to follow your calling for life or my calling for life? But it is very much the sense of like the husband is the head of the wife. There's the mission and vision God gives them. And yet the wife alongside him is called to fulfill that mission. And so it's just this really beautiful way of thinking about the way that we are called to a fight. We are fighting against sin, against the world, and against the devil. And while that's going to take on different forms, particularly for men and women in marriage, the wife is called to be a battlemate, to be an essential aid and helper to her husband. And without her faithfulness, it's going to undermine and weaken that which the Lord has called her husband to. And what a shame to miss out on that, which is why I say it's in direct conflict with the battle of the sexes that we hear so much about in our culture, which is to say that men and women are ultimately at odds with one another. And they're both fighting for their own identity, their rights, to have the final say, to be the most successful, whatever the case is. And they're ultimately viewing marriage as an individual project that they enter into rather than this unified calling to fulfill the mission the Lord has given them.